Jesse, we've got much more to cover. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for the rapid fire.
All right, let's do it. So, Lorenzo Styles, he's been a topic of conversation recently. And that, of course, came up with Marcus Freeman. And we got to see that dose of Lorenzo Styles and that experiment with him at cornerback last week. And here's Marcus Freeman talking about that.
He can do, it gives others opportunities, right? And so if Jack Kaiser is a one position guy, we know Jack Kaiser is going to be on the field. And if he's a one position guy, well, the guy behind him, it might be a younger guy, isn't going to get an opportunity.
Okay, that was the wrong bite. So unfortunately, that was Marcus Freeman talking about Jack Kaiser instead of Lorenzo Styles. So let me. I do have one more Lorenzo Styles soundbite that I was going to play if I can find it here real quickly. So Freeman was asked whose idea it was to try Styles at cornerback. Let's try this one.
It was my, you know, coming from my background, I told him I see a lot of traits that he possesses that really could resonate on the defensive side of the ball. But I want it to be his decision. I want him to feel good about, what position he's playing. And so I said, hey, if you want to experiment a little bit, play a little bit of DB on one-on-ones, like play man. And now he did it in high school. And I know a lot of people from where he's from in Columbus, Ohio, and they said he was a dang good DB in high school. And so I've always just kind of, put that carrot in his ear. But it was him ultimately that said, okay, hey, I want to try it. I want to try it, Coach. I know you've said it and you said it. And we'll see after next week what we decide to do with him.
All right, Jess. So let's start with this. Does the fact that this idea came from Marcus Freeman affect how you think about this experiment?
I think that it would only affect me in a positive way because of what he kind of prefaced that clip with is with my background and what I've heard about you during the recruiting because he's from Columbus, Ohio. So Marcus Freeman, that guy, he's been on Freeman's radar for probably a long time, even before he got to Notre Dame. I don't know when those two lined up. I don't know if Lorenzo was here technically a year before Freeman, if they were in the same, coming in together. But either way, Freeman's known about Styles. He's heard about Styles. And I think with the defensive background and knowing, what Marcus Freeman was able to accomplish defensively, if he says that someone is, has the traits of what it is to be a good corner, I think that it only makes me feel more confident in kind of what he's saying and the potential of, Styles being a good coverage corner.
Yeah, I like how Marcus Freeman said it was his idea, but he also, kind of put it out there for Styles and wanted it to be his decision ultimately. It's like you hear that about some people. It's like, well, they've got to think it's their idea, to really buy into it. And so he kind of floated this whole thing. I think the fact that it did start with Freeman though kind of puts more into it than, because he started off saying, well, it was only for one or two plays and all this different, like when he was asking us how much we got to see and all that kind of stuff. One play, one period. But the fact that it came from him and the fact that, this was, this guy is a wide receiver. Like I've seen, like the Pat Terrell as an example. Like you've seen this before where guys play both in high school and maybe they start off as a receiver, like guys who have some issues with consistency catching the ball as a wide receiver. It's kind of like the old joke. You see them move to the defensive side of the ball. And like when you look at some of the film that you see on Lorenzo's stat, now granted it's high school film, but still like a very physical type corner. And as Brian talked about last week, a press corner in high school. And like if you can do that in high school, then like why not give it a shot? He's got the body for it. We saw some physicality out of him last week, and he looks like he's really got the knack for it. And so, like to me, the fact that it started with the head coach as his idea, it's just like there's some more merit to it. I think. And Freeman did say that, like there's a good chance that we'll get to see him out there playing some defense on Saturday. So you're more looking forward to seeing that or seeing him as a receiver, because he's probably going to do a little bit of both.
I would actually be more inclined to see him at wide receiver. And Michael Johnson beat me to the point in the chat that I wanted to get to is I think it'll do something for him mentally. I think last season really did a number on him mentally, and being at corner, like it's just more reactionary. It's more playing, and it's just there's less to know. And I think that could potentially benefit him and just allow him to play more as a natural athlete. And, you talk about guys who go from wide receiver to corner and how it benefits them. I mean, look at Trayvon Diggs. He's an all-pro cornerback. And the reason why he has such good ball skills is because he started out, playing wide receiver. And I think that is something that, not that, those two are so similar, but like Lorenzo Styles playing defense, playing corner, having the physicality to press, having the speed to be able to run man on man. I think it's something that is very beneficial for his game because, again, I just think it'll allow him to think less and just play more and really enjoy kind of just playing football again.
Yeah, and like Chi-Town says, he could play dime and split end. I will be curious to see like how long this experiment continues, because I would think that if they're willing to put him out there in the spring game defensively, like one, you've got some leeway to do that. But if they're willing to do that, that means they have to at least be giving it, some serious consideration, more than just, a couple plays during practice here and there, like, so what's he going to work on this summer? Like, how much is he going to work on that? How much would he continue to split time versus do you move him over there full time defensively if you decide to go in on it? Because, that's, again, a guy who did it in high school, but hasn't done it for the last couple of years at the college level. And also the chance to work, more with Mike Mickens and what Mickens has been able to do with the guys at that position. Like, would there be enough to keep him there playing both ways, or would you want him to stick to one side? I guess would be my question.
I think I would ultimately prefer someone who is just committed to one side or the other. And I think the only thing that I would like in terms of flexibility is if he does decide to commit 100% to offense, I think it would be okay to see him and maybe in some like dime or nickel packages ultimately. But if he goes strictly defense, I wouldn't want to see him worrying about the offensive side of the ball, because again, I think that's where a lot of his struggles comes from. I think he's just he's just been thinking too much and getting himself so worked up about, running the perfect route or being in the perfect position and, not knowing, where to be sometimes. And so again, at corner, you're just really, am I in man or am I in zone? And if I'm in zone, what part of the field am I, responsible for? And I think that's a lot easier than kind of, what entails to be an elite wide receiver.
Yeah, and that'll take us into the next topic. Virginia Tech grad transfer Kaleb Smith, of course, announced his retirement from football Saturday. So scale of 1 to 10, how does it affect your concern level for the wide receiver position for the Irish?
Yeah, so if 10 was like ultimately the most amount of concern, I would say that my concern level would be at like a solid 2 or 3. And ultimately, it doesn't provide much concern for me being at a 2 or 3. The only thing that I think that they lose is just veteran experience. Some of those,
right.
And I think Tobias ultimately, I mean, it's not even a question. He's more athletic. He's going to be a better wide receiver than Kaleb. But what Kaleb provides is maybe stuff that Tobias hasn't thought about in the film room, or stuff that, a veteran can say, hey, when a safety is maybe lined up like this, you might want to think this sort of thing, or hey, maybe you notice the corner is doing this, that might be a tendency that leads to this. So the only thing I'm concerned about them losing again is just, some sort of veteran experience and just a guy who's played in a lot of games so far. He can provide insight for some of these younger wide receivers. But when we're talking like overall ability, catch making ability, athleticism, that kind of stuff, overall ceiling as a wide receiver, I'm just not concerned at all, really.
Mine is a 1. for this reason, because of some of the things that you just talked about, and two, because of coming into this spring, Kaleb Smith was, had more experience than anyone at wide receiver on the roster for the Irish. And the second most experienced guy was Lorenzo Styles. So now we're talking about a guy who just left the program and a guy who could be at the very least splitting time at cornerback, if not moving to cornerback. But we've not talked about either one of those guys for anything that we've seen or heard, or even on highlights from this spring. Like, we haven't talked about seeing anything from either one of those guys, and it's not a knock on them. We haven't. We haven't been talking about them. It's been Tobias Merriweather, it's been Chris Tyree, it's been Deion Colsey. All these other guys are the ones who have stood out at the wide receiver group so far. So, obviously wish Kaleb Smith the best, and hopefully things work out for him, based on kind of this, some of the stuff that was in his announcement from Saturday. But it doesn't strike me an overwhelming concern. I think that we thought that they were going to need to lean on him a bit more coming into the spring practice, but that's not the way it turned out. And, again, like, he's retiring and Lorenzo Styles might be moving to corner. So I think there's so much upside to the rest of that group. Like, the floor, I think, is still really high for this group. And, like, Chris Tyree has been doing good things out there, and that's been like the bonus addition to this group as well, is getting Chris Tyree as a receiver. So I think there's too much upside between them and what we talked about with some stuff with the quarterbacks. So not a real high level of concern for me either. And as Derek said, gained a scholarship as well. So, that'll be something to kind of watch when spring ends. May 1st, how many weeks we got? Got 2 weeks. Transfer portal is going to open up. So Notre Dame women's basketball added a three-point shooting Fordham grad transfer guard Anna DeWolf today. And meanwhile, Van-Allen Lubin from the Irish men's basketball team announced he is entering the transfer portal. Think it's a bigger gain for the women or a bigger loss for the men?
I think it's a bigger gain for the women overall. Last season, their kind of spot up 3-point shooter got hurt, towards the beginning, middle of the season. And you're going to always need, someone to knock down the shots. And when you have someone like Sonia Citron, and, oh man, I can't think of Olivia Miles, when you have those two who are such good facilitators of the ball, not really known for being knockdown shooters, they're going to draw a lot of attention and coverage, especially as they're moving with the ball. And that's naturally going to lead to maybe some more double teams. And so when you have someone who you can kick it out to in the corner and be that knockdown shooter, I think that's a great overall addition. And then when you start looking at the men's side of things, I mean, the whole roster is scrapped. And so when you look at a guy like Lubin, yeah, sure, he was great to have, and he's a great, recruit and overall talent. But I mean, Mike is just going to kind of tear down that whole roster and build it up how he pleases. And sure, would have been a little bit easier with someone like Lubin. Yeah. But they're not in any serious contention next season to run the table. And I think it's very, the women had high expectations this year. And, because of some of those injuries down the stretch, they just weren't as deep as they'd like to be. And then when you bring back, who they're getting, and then they're bringing in some of these, these stud freshman players, like the girl who was the McDonald's, MVP of the game, All-American MVP, and then you bring in a lethal 3-point shooter. I think it just builds up the fact that, the expectation, I think, next year for the women's team is Final Four or better out of the gate. And when you can add a 3-point shooter like that, it only kind of, it just strengthens you that much more overall.
Yeah, DeWolf was the Atlantic 10 Player of the Year a couple of years ago. She averaged over 20 points a game as a sophomore, and hit like 70, I think it was 73 3-pointers this season. And she's been all A10 the last 3 years at Fordham. And to be able to get her and all the things that you talked about, like, they needed another legitimate 3-point threat. And you get that now. So you've got Citron, who is a really good percentage 3-point shooter, a little bit more volume after the injury to Mabry. But so now you're going to have two there. Rish coming in, the freshman, another 3-point shooter. The backcourt is going to be really deep, and the key piece is still finding someone else in the front court after you lose Lauren Ebo. And I saw that Michael Johnson was talking about the player from DePaul, and like there's so many players in the transfer portal. I have no idea which way they're stretching right now. But so I agree with what you're saying. I think that the bigger gain is for the women than the loss for the men, because this was going to be such a rebuild for Micah Shrewsbury anyway. You would like to have a guy like Lubin. The timing of this is weird because it's been 3 weeks now at this point, hasn't it, since Shrewsbury was hired, and you're pretty deep into the transfer portal window at this point. So I was just kind of surprised to see this announcement now, but ultimately, again, this was going to be such a big rebuild for Shrewsbury anyway that I don't think this is ultimately going to be a huge loss in the short term for the Irish men's program to see Lubin leave. You're right. I mean, he is a good player, but I don't think it's going to be, a resounding loss for them.
Yeah, they need to be, the men's issue just goes deeper than losing, one really good player. And I think that's ultimately what it is. And do I think Van Lubin is overall if there was a way to, basically say if Lubin and this transfer were equal, I would say Lubin's game is better and he's more elite. But what she provides overall to a team aspect of things and where the team can go next season, I just find it way more impactful.
I agree. Fill in the blank. Cody Bellinger made his return to Los Angeles with the Cubs this weekend. Before stepping into the batter's box for his first at-bat Friday night, Dodgers fans gave him a standing ovation. And so Bellinger kind of paused for a second to soak it in before he stepped into the batter's box. Well, not so fast, because home plate umpire Jim Wolf gave Bellinger a strike because of a pitch clock violation. And that is blank.
That's just absurd. This is a guy who was a rookie of the year with the Dodgers. He was an MVP, with the Dodgers. He won a World Series with the Dodgers. He won a Silver Slugger, a Gold Glove. I mean, he's got an entire trophy case, dedicated with his time with the Dodgers. And I'm sure that it being his first time back and, being on a 1-year deal with the Cubs, it was an emotional situation for him. It was probably his home, and he probably never considered the fact that he would play for another team. And so it's absurd with these new pitch clock rules. There's got to be exceptions. It's just one pitch. It's not like he's stepping out of the box every time and he's getting this ovation. And I think it must have ticked him off, because later in the game he robbed Jason Hayward of a shot to center field where he brought back a home run in a 1-0 game. So, and I think he turned to the fans and they were booing him, and he just chuckled, at that point, because he goes from, the standing ovation, and then of course when it comes down to it and he's robbing the Dodgers of a home run, then how the tides quickly turn. But it's just, it's stupid overall, and it's just, it's just have some common sense. When the situation calls for it, allow a guy to just soak in the moment a little bit.
Yeah, it's example 1,554 why umpires should not think that fans are there to see run the game. Umpire. Yes, and it's I get it. You've been told about this pitch clock and the rules of the pitch clock and all that.
But you really think the MLB is going to call you and say, "Hey, we're pissed at you for allowing Bellinger to get a little ovation in"?
That's right. Know the moment. He had a successful run as a Los Angeles Dodger. He was obviously part of the World Series championship team, and now it's early in the season, and he is back there in LA with a new team. It's a total joke that something like this would happen. It's and it might, maybe it's just a good fan strategy with the pitch clock. Maybe the first at bat of every game, fans should just stand up and give a standing ovation to a guy from the other team and
get an immediate strike.
Get a strike on him right away. So total joke, and it's just another umpire that needs to get over himself, unfortunately. So hey, good weekend for the Cubs though, taking 2 out of 3 out there.
First time that they've won a series in LA in a very long time. And Anthony says, as a Cardinals fan, I enjoy anytime the Cubs have a negative issue, and I'm enjoying the Cardinals' ERA right now as a pitching staff, and the fact that Wilson Contreras is not performing as well as Yan Gomes this season. I think that's a really good benefit.
Yes, thank you, Derek. Michael is saying, talk about Notre Dame football. Michael, if you're new to the show, welcome. This is the part of the show where we talk about things other than Notre Dame football. So
we just had a real nice hour conversation about Notre Dame football.
We literally talked for an hour about Notre Dame football. A lot of things regarding the quarterbacks and everything else. We're getting late in the show here. This is called Rapid Fire. We talk about a lot of different things. And we started Rapid Fire off with Notre Dame football. So we talk about things in Rapid Fire that aren't all Notre Dame football. I'm sorry. So, but again, there are plenty of archive shows in the start of this show where we literally spent a full hour talking about Sam Hartman, Tyler Buckner, quarterbacks, wide receivers, everything else. We've talked a lot of Notre Dame football today, but again, enjoyed your cowboy hat. But if you're new, like, just catch you up on the format a little bit. Speaking of something that is not Notre Dame football, there is a new character on the hit TV show Ted Lasso this season named Zava. Jesse, do you buy or sell Aaron Rodgers as the real life Zava?
I actually, I buy this more than I sell it. And I think it's a really funny comparison because, on Ted Lasso, this new Zava guy is kind of picked up and he's like, the greatest kind of soccer player at the time right now. And he's bounced around to a lot of different teams. And he's just this real kind of self-centered, I'm Zava, ball goes to me. And then he's got all these kind of like holistic like he's always sitting in a circle, like meditating or just kind of doing these off-brand kind of holistic things. And that reminds me a lot of, of Aaron Rodgers in the past few seasons as he's gone on these like retreats and, trying all these different, like mental escape stuff that he's got going on. And so do I think that Zava is as crazy and as self-centered and toxic, as Aaron Rodgers is? No, but I think it is a pretty good like comparison of if Zava was, a current NFL player, who would he be most like? It's got to be Aaron Rodgers.
But when you look at Zava from like, I don't even know, like, is that, I don't think it's a man bun, or whatever you I don't know what you'd call that. He's got like a little sprout, like would-be ponytail in the back, and he's got the scraggle.
Yeah.
And like you see him like he's like looking in the mirror and getting in his car. It's like it reminded me of Michael Jordan was a host of Saturday Night Live. I don't know, it's probably been at least 30 years ago now, but he did like this whole thing. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. It was like the whole thing. And it's like Zava looking in the mirror, giving himself, like reassurance. And then he,
affirmations.
The affirmations and trying to psych himself up. But, that's when he's in his private time. But as soon as he goes out in the public, he puts on this persona,
exactly.
Like he's the greatest. I can totally see that being Aaron Rodgers, like literally, like the most actual insecure guy in sports. And, but then, like behind the scenes, and then he goes out, in public and he's doing his Aaron Rodgers stuff and everything else. We appear to have lost Jesse there for, so I completely, like, I would not be surprised if, because Jason Sudeikis, who of course is the star of Ted Lasso and, is also one of the writers on the show, I would not be surprised if they actually based Zava on Aaron Rodgers, like what they think Aaron Rodgers is behind the scenes. So I completely buy it for me. All right, today is National Blah, Blah, Blah Day. I had never heard of this until today. It's a day to encourage people to listen to those nagging words from your loved ones or friends and to put action to those words. So, what sports figure most needs to listen up and pay attention to the advice they're being given on National Blah, Blah, Blah Day?
So I am going to be upfront and honest. I read this question wrong at first. So I would appreciate if we let you go first on this one.
What did you think I said here?
I thought the question was like if you could take advice from any if you could take advice, not give advice, or sorry, if you could get advice from someone, not who needs to listen to the advice that like everyone else is kind
Oh,
of
like
like
who would
giving
who would
them.
you want to get advice from? Well, you can
Yeah.
go with that as well. I mean, I tell you what, there's a couple here. I'm not gonna. I'll see if maybe you end up going with this other one. I'll just say Lamar Jackson because, like Lamar Jackson, I think, like especially when you look at the contract that Jalen Hurts just signed, like Jalen Hurts has an agent. He has an intermediary. He has a go between him and the teams. And Lamar, like everyone is kind of heaping a lot of this stuff on. Why won't the Ravens sign Lamar Jackson? Well, maybe Lamar Jackson should just hire an agent, and that would take care of some of this stuff. Like maybe you should listen to all this that's out there right now. So I would go with Lamar Jackson.
See, I'm still like that's it. Like my brain just can't come to anyone right now, and I don't know what's going on.
Well, the other one would be Jerry Jones because like
That would be a very I do that would be
that
the
was who I
easy
thought you would
answer.
probably start, and it was like it was just set up there, like a
Here's a nice
softball.
tee.
Basically, yeah, that's right. Like that was the first one that came to mind, but I thought, for all of our regulars, who hear us beat, that drum too much, I thought that I would get away. But like Jerry Jones is the easy one, like the guy who still thinks that he's the general manager and continues to do the same old things again and again and again. Maybe you should just listen to some of the people, who, would tell you, hey, maybe you should, actually hire a real general manager and not make it a family business. I don't know.
So yeah, I guess I'll just go the route of who I would take advice from, like as a player, and how that would translate to my game. And I think that the most beneficial would be someone like David Ortiz, just being a guy that was a pure hitter his whole life. That's someone I would very much want to listen to because pure hitting was my thing. That's what I was really good at too. And just outside of baseball too, I think he's a good character person. The way
Okay.
he speaks.
So you would
And
want to listen to him? Okay.
that's the person I would want to take the advice from, not someone who should listen to the advice that everyone is giving him or her.
Right. All right. I like that. All right. Well, just for our new friend Michael, we got a super chat, and I appreciate that from I don't know.
Relic.
What's that?
Looks like the name is Relic.
Relic? Okay. Thanks for the super chat. Would you rather have an 11-win season and lose a close New Year's Six bowl with Hartman, or a 10-win season and a decent bowl with Buckner?
I'm gonna go 11 wins in a New Year's Six. Notre Dame hasn't been able to accomplish that New Year's Six bowl win in a very long time. I think that is, if you're not gonna
lose a close New Year's Six bowl, you're losing the New Year's Six bowl. Yeah. So that means you're 11-1
or 10-2.
Right.
But then you're going to be 11-3 and 11-2 by the time it's
11-2. You're going to finish 11-2.
Right.
If you lose the New Year's Six.
I really don't know. Like I think neither would be a true win. And I guess the question ultimately stems from like, would you rather, allow Buckner to develop more and assuming that he's going to transition into the starting quarterback role after Hartman leaves? And so it's like, okay, are you really satisfied with just one more win essentially? And then can that, mediocre bowl make up for it? This is like a real like trick question in my opinion. And I don't know if there's a good answer. And I think it's a great question overall, but to me, I would still ride with Hartman because I think he gives you the best chance of ultimately winning the national championship at the end of the year. And I know that's not part of the question, but I'm going to ride and die with Hartman no matter what, because I think the ultimate goal is championships, and that's who's going to give you a better chance at the championship.
Yeah. Based on what the actual goal is to get into the college football playoff and win a college football playoff semifinal, get to the national championship game, and obviously ultimately win a national championship. Based on all that, it would be Hartman, because I do think that's who gives them the best chance to do that this year. Now, based on this hypothetical that is being posed here, winning the national championship is already off the table. So, like, if I know that going in and I have to base it on this hypothetical, I would go with the Buckner option because it's a year of experience, a full season of experience for Buckner, and that ultimately sets you up for the next year to give you a better chance to win a national championship.
Right. And so in this specific question, I would go with Buckner because you're basically saying that with both of them, you're almost achieving the same thing, falling short of the playoffs, falling short of a big, bowl game win. And so if that means that, Buckner would get the year of experience, then, and that would set him up for a better position next year and ultimately put Notre Dame in a better position, then yeah, I would go with Buckner. But I don't, again, going back to how I answered before this, I think Hartman gives them the better shot, and that's who I want to ride with this season.
Right. Josh says 11 wins, they're going to the playoff. 10 wins, it's a New Year's Six bowl. That's, if you lose a game, yeah, I mean, I would say you probably have around a 97, 98% chance to get into the playoffs with 11 wins if you're 11-1, but there is always the outside chance of, like, say, both Ohio State and Michigan, getting in, or two SEC teams getting in, those kind of, but, ultimately, if it comes down to, if you've got one or two undefeated teams at the top, and then you've got, 4 one-loss teams behind them, there is always a chance, someone is going to get left out in that scenario. So there's always a, like, odds are in your favor that you're going to make the playoffs with one loss, but there is still a chance you will miss based on how many other teams are sitting there with the same record, because then you have to start, dissecting resumes and all that kind of stuff. So, good question, though. Good hypothetical. And we are able to wrap it up with a bonus Notre Dame football question at the end. So, glad for that. Jess, appreciate you jumping in tonight. I will talk to you. Now we've got, he's slipping in super chats right before the buzzer. Thanks for one more. If you could handpick a non-quarterback player on the current roster to break into the top 10 Heisman candidates type of season, who would it be?
Tobias Merriweather.
You're going Tobias Merriweather. I'm going Audric Estime would be mine.
See, the only rebuttal I'd have to that is the run game is proven, and I think that they're going to have a successful run game regardless. But if they can get an elite wide receiver to take over, and really boost Sam Hartman's game, and then ultimately balance out the pass run game, I think that's more so my thought process.
And Merriweather could return punts. I was going to say, like, typically for a wide receiver, I'm saying typically because I know we just had a wide receiver win a Heisman a couple years ago, and I can't remember. Did Smith?
Devontae?
Did he return punts at Alabama? I can't remember if he did or not. But it seemed like most of what he did as a receiver. Like, my point was going to be, like, whether it's like a Rocket Ismail or a Tim Brown or some of these other guys, like, you need the return part of it because that gives you highlight type stuff, that's going to catch people's eye in terms of Heisman and stuff like that. Johnson is saying Logan Diggs. Derek is saying Buckner, but the question was non-quarterback player on the roster. Derek, come on, listen up. Stay out of your
scotch,
your grandma's moonshine there. All right, good questions there at the end, and we appreciate the super chats there at the end. Morrison would be an interesting one as well, if he could have the same kind of season. I'm going to say he's going to have a hard time duplicating the interceptions because I think that he's going to be someone that they're going to want to avoid throwing it. But you're going to have to pick your poison when Cam Hart is healthy. You're going to have to pick your poison who you're going to throw it. They're going to have to throw it somebody. So it's going to be really, really fun and really interesting to watch that secondary this season. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Enjoyed it. And we will talk to you later as well. Hit the like button on your way out and subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Don't forget to do those taxes.